evening. Welcome to Unsuited. We're here with our second episode of the third season. This entire season, we're focusing on women in law. We talk to them about their triumphs, their challenges, and all the ecosystems that have been enablers. Our guest today is Tejal Patil. She's the Senior Legal Advisor for India and South Asia with OYO. Tejal started her career with a law firm in Bombay, then transitioning to the in-house role, doing various roles through the in-house space, both pan-India and then moving countries. Tejal's actually moved cities and countries all through the 25 plus years of her career as a lawyer. The one thing she's consistently done is embraced change. And her philosophy around that is pretty simple. Don't plan too much in advance because you never know what life's going to throw at you and how it'll surprise you. Hi, Tejal. Good evening. Welcome to the show. Hi, thanks for joining. Our second guest is Aparna Mittal. She's the founder of Samana. Aparna started her career with law firms, then moving on to partnership fairly swiftly. She then wanted to explore her potential probably beyond the norm and believed that skills were transferable. That's when she decided to make the leap into entrepreneurship, founding this Center for Policy Law. Hi, Aparna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, Vikas, over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, ladies from London. Good afternoon, where you are in India. As Tanisha mentioned, you're both first-generation lawyers, making it to the top, of your respective careers. One in-house, one as partner, and then also setting up her own entrepreneurial firm. Just really want to tell our audience, how has that journey been? Especially in a legal world that's dominated by men, and along your journeys, any experiences, that have left an indelible mark on yourselves. So, Aparna, we'll go with you first.
Sure. Thank you, Vikas, for that question. So I think more than gender, I think it's both age and gender. And, law per se, irrespective of the kind of practice, tends to be very hierarchical. There is this, this kind of concept of you have to wait your time and only then you will get certain opportunities or particular kind of exposure. So I realized that, in addition to hard work, there was always a lot of difficult conversations to be had. And I think to make your mark or, and I don't want to use the word success because that means different things to different people. But I personally think that, you have to have a very clear vision for yourself, not in a as Tanisha, you were saying, I have to do this in this many years, but I don't like what is happening or I like what is happening. I want to do it in a different manner. And you have to cultivate that confidence to kind of speak up for yourself and really challenge the norm or challenge the stereotype. Because unless you do that, you will not be able to bring your own unique talent or thinking to the conversation. And I think in a long journey of, 10, 12, 14, 16 years of professional life, there will be ups and downs, right? I mean, it's bound to be. But I think what's important is that you have to assert yourself and you have to make your own case based on your own work and merit to let people take you seriously and to define the boundaries that you want them to respect for you.
Yeah. When you say having others take you seriously, was that something you learned with experience and wisdom as you go along that kind of career path?
Absolutely. So I don't want to, get into areas of harassment because invariably when you talk about being taken seriously, one goes in that direction. But I think I realized fairly in my first year itself that I had very clear opinions about things. Both it could be on a point of law or it could be about how we are organizing certain things at the law firm. And I always found it very difficult to keep my opinions to myself. So, no matter how much people liked it or did not like it, I wanted to have my say. And I think that's something that you have to be your own authentic self overall. And thankfully, the first place that I worked at, the leadership was very, very open to young people going and speaking their mind and, challenging the status quo in some way or the other. But I did realize that unless you assert yourself, unless you speak your mind, you may not agree with everything, but at least unless you create that space where you can respectfully have a conversation, which could be a divergent conversation, you are not going to be able to do what you really want to do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because, especially when you're young and you're starting your career, that's not a neat thing that comes naturally to everyone, especially like you mentioned in hierarchical structures and, large corporates. Having the confidence to speak your mind, especially against those that are seasoned, takes time, and not everyone kind of rises to that challenge. Tejal, let's move over to you because obviously you've had, you've also been, around a few years now as well, and have made it to, very top in terms of the in-house community. So if you just kind of talk a bit about your journey.
So, let me kind of get back to you a little bit about first generation lawyers. This is a profession where we kind of underestimate the first generation a little bit. Like you'd never ask someone, are you a first generation software engineer? The way it works is, there are certain professions, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or where, through the years, the, the pedigree and the kind of backgrounds you come from has had a lot of importance, especially when our country was developing. So in terms of sort of starting out a legal career, one always later thinks about, I miss those breakfast conversations where a parent or an uncle or an aunt could have familiarized me with the law and I would have understood what it's all about. I would have had another few uncles and aunts who I could have called up and sort of asked for legal advice when I got stuck in my first year of internship or things like that. So I think it does definitely have an impact, and there is a larger obstacle to overcome if you're a first generation in this profession. The other piece really in the in-house world, both in the external counsel and in the in-house world, there used to be more male. The lucky part for me was that at the time I entered the profession, India was also opening up to FDI for the first time. So there was a little bit of an advent of what we call the new age law firms, as well as the in-house companies, wanting in-house people doing different areas of law, which were not hallmarks or what I call territories of the older generation. This was new to everyone. So I think that created a little bit of a level playing field and allowed new people to come into the profession without feeling extremely disadvantaged, is the way I would see it. Some of that culture still has to be dealt with, but as we go into, cyber, artificial intelligence, we get into privacy, we get into new areas. I'm hoping that, the fact that you're not related to someone or you are new, allows you to grow as much as anyone else.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think we kind of overlook the fact that you're right. When we say doctors and lawyers, there's that generational thing. You can't, there is normally a, passing down to second or third generation, but you're right. We never say you're a first generation software engineer, which is an interesting point. And I know when we've interviewed different people on the program, you do hear that story about, I was at the table, my uncles, my father, grandfather were always talking, and that inspired me to, get into the law. And then you have that natural sounding board, to help you on that journey. So, and it's also interesting you mentioned, but even back in the 90s, using the phrase new age lawyer, which today is what we're looking at again, the new age lawyers. The other thing we want to talk about is that for both of you, change has been a real common theme. So Tejal, when you started off, you initially wanted to be get into the ISA route. You gave up that dream to become a lawyer. You moved to a law firm. Then you started your own practice. Then you eventually moved in-house. Plus you moved cities across India as well as globally. And you then actually started your own in-house career, not in India, but in Singapore, so overseas. So how did you make all that happen? And how was that experience of starting in-house overseas compared to, what most peers do is start, domestically?
So I wish I could tell you it was a plan, right? But just like Tanisha said, there was no plan. I just went with the flow. So it was never a lifelong dream of mine to be a lawyer, nothing when I was a little child that I wore black robes and looked into the mirror. Nothing like that ever happened. So like you said, it wasn't moving from one dream to another. So I had literally joined government law college for the library. I thought I would buy brilliance tutorials and I would do my IAS entrance exam and serve the country, right? That was the idealistic dream. The canteen and friends and all of that took over, and I did well in law too. And it just so happened that all those tutorials gathered dust, and I became a lawyer. So, I wish all of these things in my life were planned at some point, but I really didn't plan anything. Even moving cities, I was in a law firm in Bombay. And, when you're newly married and you can't afford a house in South Bombay next to the court, you commute. And 1 year on the suburban train is all I could take. And I was like, I need to get out of here. And I know friends and peers who actually did that for years and today are one of the leading luminaries in the country. So, yes, sometimes I look at that and say that could have been a path, but I couldn't take it. And when the Bangalore opportunity came up for my husband, we took it. And the other thing that I want to sort of tell all the women, that I was a trailing spouse after that, because we had a little pact, my husband and I, saying whoever earned more money, the other one would follow. And I lost that battle my whole life. So wherever I have moved to has been due to the spouse. And hence, I literally kind of took what I got. When I reached Singapore, I didn't have a job. I was expecting a baby. I had a little one. I had to kind of figure out what to do with her. But I was getting a job as a contractor in GE. And I was like, look, nothing else is coming along. So I took it. So this entire thing of going in-house or moving from a law firm, nothing was planned. So change happened. Yeah. And I guess it continues to happen. So which is why I've, kind of come back. I did, though, always wanted to come back to India. I always felt like Indian lawyers and Indian in-house teams didn't have the exposure, the coaching, the training to be the best. And so, I was really thrilled when I came to India and got the in-house role. But that was the only one I sort of all my life thought maybe one day I'll do that. And it happened years later.
Yeah. And how was it? I mean, when you said you joined, GE in Singapore as a contractor, but how was that kind of route? Was that easy, especially as you'd been doing, you'd been a lawyer before that for, 6-7 years prior to that?
See, I think one had to swallow one's ego a little bit. At that point, you're in an alien country, you're not qualified there. You think you're really smart. The whole world is yet to discover that. And I, pretty much took what I got. And it somehow at some level didn't bother me, because the strangest part was I was filling in a role for someone who was 20 years my senior, who was leaving the organization. They wanted me for, 3 months to a year to help that transition. At the end of that, they gave me his role. So, it just happened. So the way I see it is, don't think about what it is, where you are in the organization, but the fact that you need to get back, and what is it that's going to get you back and get you thinking again. And then afterwards, I just think hard work and dedication takes over.
Yeah.
Very different in-house abroad. But a slightly easier transition than a law firm. It was tough also at that time because you only had foreign law firms who were looking for foreign degrees. And while I was a solicitor from England, I hadn't practiced abroad. So it was a tough entry.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, because we're talking about 20 years ago, you still did very well to get into a foreign corporate, and start up from, essentially you were starting from scratch again. But I think those kind of opportunities don't always exist in India, even today. For people to get back into it becomes difficult.
And that's what I think, right? Sometimes you have to step back to step forward, and you need to kind of do different things because you don't know at which point they will come back and help you. So, for example, when I was moving to Japan, I actually went kicking and screaming. And the role after that was an Asia Pacific role with a Japanese CEO. And the first thing that kind of, I think, went well in the interview is, oh, you've lived in Japan, you understand the culture, you can do this.
Wow.
And I didn't know it was going to help me at the time. I was, really finding ways and means of remote relationship and all these things, that one goes through for a while and then says it won't work. So you never know what experience in life will come back at some point and support the next move you make.
Yeah, I think we'll move on to your Aparna now, but I think great what you're mentioning there, Tejal, as well as that hard work and dedication. I think adaptability is so important, and especially like you said, from you'd set up on a career, you'd done well at law college, you'd worked at a law firm, started again, you were doing well, but having that, managing your ego and being adaptable to just say, right, I'm going to start again and let's see what happens. I mean, that's a great trait and a great lesson to say to others, especially youngsters, about swallow the ego and just take it one step at a time. And 20 years, 20 years on, you're one of the leading lights in the in-house community now. Aparna, we're going to move to you because obviously, you've shown big change as well. Like you went to law firm, you became partner very young, within some of the leading law firms in India. And then I think to the dismay of probably your peer group and even youngsters today would hear that you gave it up. You gave that dream up to start your entrepreneurial journey. So why did you take that leap, and how did you manage the shock factor that comes with such a move?
So, and I don't want to sound immodest, but if I were to look back at my own career trajectory, I always wanted to do more than what the defined role brought to the table or what was the expected norm. So I remember even when I was a managing associate, my partners always told me, you're already doing what we expect a partner to do. So I think that just came naturally because I got bored with the given very easily. I had been partner for almost 6 years by the time I quit the second law firm I was at. I loved the work, corporate law and M&A. I loved it, but there was a growing void inside me because I thought my skills were not changing. After, having practiced for 13, 14 years, you pretty much, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think you've done a lot of, variety of work and a lot of complex matters. It doesn't excite you anymore. And I also somehow thought that my skills were not growing. I had been partner for 6 years. I was doing everything that one needs to do and perhaps more. And I had begun to feel really, unsatisfied and monotonous in some way. So, and I always believe, I've always believed in not following a traditional path. I followed a traditional path more by default, not because I planned it that way. And it was quite okay for me to take a break and go back to the drawing board. And because I think that, no matter how much a job pays you or what your designation is, at some point, if you're not feeling satisfied, if you're not feeling mentally happy, you need to step back and reassess what you're doing. And when I transitioned, I just took a break. I didn't know what I was going to do. I took a 6-month break. I did nothing. I literally didn't even open my laptop. I did nothing. And then slowly I said, let's do something which I felt strongly about. So, gender and particularly transgender was an area of my interest. Environment was an area of interest. And then I started putting my mind, I created a plan B and I said, okay, let's launch this. I'll be honest with you, I got a lot of condescension when I started. I personally believe I was a little, and I don't want to sound arrogant, I was a little ahead of the market in India. People didn't really understand what I was planning to do, especially with the diversity and inclusion practice, which now has become the buzzword, ironically. There was a lot of condescension. There was a lot of, is everything okay? there was also a lot of voyeuristic curiosity, which I did not appreciate, because people wanted to know if something went wrong, and that's why you left a law firm. And I think that at some level, as lawyers, we take the mold or the journey so seriously that we forget to give people space, that you may want to do something different, and there is always this sense of you have to be this in a particular organization for you to be good, right? And I think that's what was a shock factor more for people than for myself. And I set sail with a very clear vision of what I wanted to do. And entrepreneurship, of course, has its ups and downs. It has its own journey. So a lot of it has been a big learning exercise for me. And I am very, very happy I did that, because it makes you go back to your roots in some way, to really go back in terms of what you can do, what you want to do, what your ethical matrix is, how much are you willing to push yourself. And I really, really have loved that journey of self-exploration and also self-expression through my work, which now traverses both legal work and D&I consulting, which is really a lot more perhaps on the psychological aspect of it. Like when I do trainings on unconscious bias, I use my legal skills, I use my everything I have observed in people, working with them, interacting with them. I can bring that all together and put that out in the practice that I do, with an aim that we can make workplaces better for far more many people in this world than just the few that we talk about.
That's super point.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I think what Aparna's done is actually she's gone ahead and just redefined success, right? We've all got such traditional views on what success entails or what accomplished means. And then here she's sitting at partnership and she says, okay, bye, I'm off. That's very, very interesting, Aparna. Sorry, Vikas, you were saying.
Yeah, I think most people would have thought you were crazy at the time. Maybe,
Yeah, absolutely.
You've achieved the dream, you achieved it young.
I must add, because, sorry, there's some lag. Why don't you finish?
Yeah, and you didn't just achieve partnership at any firm. Like you were at some of the leading firms when you were doing that role. So I think, how did you manage that? Because that's something that even today most youngsters aspire that. Right, this is my plan: get into a tier 1 law firm and work really hard, burning the candles all the time. Burning the candle. So within 10, 12 years, make partner.
I think because two things. There is no running away from hard work, no matter what you do. And there is no running away from, a lot of sometimes the drudgery that comes with professions like law, because a lot of it is detail oriented. You have, tons of paper to go through, etc. I don't want to sound, arrogant again, but I think I always wanted quality than quantity. And in some way, the money or the designation or the visibility was a byproduct of what I would like to believe was the hard work that I put in. And in my head, I thought that if I try doing that in any other new practice area, it may take longer, because I didn't have a brand behind me. I was starting a new brand. But I honestly believe, and this is something, I have seen since I was really a kid, that if you work hard and you have a good conscience and you work with integrity, you will find what you are chasing. It may take longer. There are no shortcuts. It may be a tough journey. But you will find what you want to do. And I think that when I started Samana, even though there were a lot of questions around me, there were no questions in my head. I was very clear, this is what I wanted to do. And thankfully, I've had a very supportive circle of friends who also look at qualitative achievements in life and expressing yourself rather than checking the box of saying, how many lakhs are you earning and what kind of card you have. That didn't really matter. Self-expression and being honest was more important than anything else which you define as success, Tanisha, traditional terms.
I'll add a little bit to what Aparna is saying, because one is what she's really proving is that career is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. And so, now these changing careers are becoming more and more the norm because you live longer and, you have options to do more things. And the other thing I think she brings to the table is this sense of fun. I always tell people, if you want to spend 12 to 14 hours of your day doing something, that's like half your life. And if you're not having fun doing it, what are you doing? I don't believe in 9 lives. So, just bringing this other aspect in and someone like Aparna doing it, I think that's amazing. It's really showing people a different end goal.
Truly is. And it's so interesting that you've both, in your own very unique ways, of course, embraced the change that has, come your way. And then you've built what you've built from there on. So just fantastic to hear, how the trajectory has been for the both of you. So thanks for sharing that piece. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is a piece I'm really, really hoping you both can answer for us in some way. So we've seen, and Aparna, you probably have far more data than we do, but typically between the 8 to 12-year peak post-qualification mark is where most women, at least in the Indian legal system, lawyers drop off, whether they're in in-house roles, whether it's law firms, whether it's practicing counsels that are doing independent legal work. And I'm not sure why that happens. Maybe you both can throw light. But given that you both had your own short breaks in different ways, I know, Tejal, for you, when you moved to Singapore and were a new mother, and Aparna, for you, of course, when you took the 6-month sabbatical to just figure out what next, right? Can you tell us a little bit about, how the comeback for each of you was and what made that comeback really possible? Because you both could have dropped off at the time, but there was that little gap and then you came back in, and how. So you may want to start with Tejal. Do you want to go first and then we move to Aparna?
Sure. So I took a break essentially for about 18 to 22 months. And honestly, maybe, I don't know whether it was these not so great motherly instincts, but I really wanted to get back. And I was told that, look, your daughter's 18 months old, she can go to preschool. So I started sending, not preschool, daycare is what it was called. And, every morning I had to drop her off to this daycare. And when I dropped her off there, I could hear her till the end of the road, weeping, crying, bawling her guts out because I was leaving her there. And I just constantly felt like a completely heartless mother. And then the supervisor at the daycare told me that, look, it's fine. If she continues post 15 days, then she's not emotionally ready. And I don't think you should take the step. She stopped crying on day 14. Okay.
God bless her.
It was heart-wrenching to get back. But it happened. And I almost saw it as a sign that, yes, I could go back and do something and get back to work. But I do really feel that long breaks don't work. If someone says, I'm going to wait for my kids to pass out of school, go to middle school, graduate, there's two things there. One is I sometimes think your kids need you more when they are older than when they're babies. Honestly, they have milk and they poop, okay, for the first few months. Not very exciting. And they smile twice a day. But when they're teenagers, when they're older, they want to connect with you. They want to talk to you. They need you around. So I don't think there is a right time to get back. What I've seen, though, is many women who've stayed out of the workforce for a long time, they find it very difficult to get back. I think it's a couple of reasons. One is it's very difficult to start from the bottom again. It requires a whole different mindset to say, I'm going to sit with the 25-year-olds. I'm going to be at the bottom of the ladder. I'm going to earn peanuts. Of course, I've heard some of sort of the condescending husbands say, oh, you can go earn your pocket money now. And it's tough for them to get back. They have developed a status symbol for themselves. So I definitely think putting in the long hours, doing things you haven't done for so many years, it's very, very difficult to get back. I know some have, and that's fabulous, but it's not the norm. Once you're out, it's difficult to get back into full-time work. I think what's really important here is to sort of, when there's a new mother or when there is some, sometimes I look at myself now, I have older parents. I would love to take a break again, and spend time with my mom. So it's really looking beyond the temporary clouds that come in different times of our career, being able to see beyond them and being able to take breaks when you need to. And soon I think we're going to see breaks, not just, women having children, but different breaks in life for different things. And so, sabbatical was a bad word. It was like, oh, you're out of a job, you haven't found something else. Now it's more acceptable if someone wants to take a break. So, I'm firmly of the view, take the break when you need it. Don't get used to it. It's like COVID, right? Very difficult to get out of track pants now.
What a fantastic analogy. That's true. That's true. Okay. That's very insightful. Thanks, Tejal. Aparna, something from you on this.
I'll say a couple of things, and I won't bore you with what I do with companies now, because I think that's one of the bigger questions we face. But I think if I were to really look at the root of it, is I think that our expectations of caregiving, they are completely skewed against women. And I think the biggest damage to any kind of parity is that we are not willing to challenge the norm. So, one of the favorite questions when I do my training sessions with youngsters is that when two people get married, and Tejal, you had a pact, but mostly it's an autopilot. Who shifts the city? And they all say, hey, the woman. I'm like, why? So I think a lot of times I think that just the larger societal background of not distributing the caregiving load equally has been the biggest reason why women do not come back to the workforce after certain points, in their career journey. It could be marriage, it could be, childbirth, etc. And I think more than that, it's also that institutionally, I think we don't treat maternity returnees as equal citizens. I think look at most of the law firms as well. If there is just so much of a pressure to be partner within X number of years, or to really be on that, I used to call it a treadmill to nowhere, pardon my calling it that anybody who takes a slightly divergent path, somebody wants to travel the world, somebody wants to explore some creative thing for a year, somebody wants to have a baby. When you came back, you were just given a knowledge management role or something else. Now, I have nothing against knowledge management roles, but this kind of intellectual condescension, I kind of think that it does more damage than what we see. That you are unwilling to respect somebody who's different or who has taken a different journey, and you are not willing to relook at how you practice your operations. It could be law, it could be management, it could be finance, whatever it is, to really make I don't even want to use the word adjustments. It sounds condescending, but you're really not going to align it with lived realities of people. And I think that is the biggest damage. And in fact, anecdotally, I must tell you, I met the CHRO of one of India's largest listed companies, and we were talking about maternity returnees, and he said, "Bahut leave leti hain." So I said, "Can you give me data?" So he said, he had this perception that a maternity returnee in his team took 6 days. I mean, you add the half days, everything, and took 6 days off in a month. And I said, "Can you pull out the data of the rest of the team?" And a lot of the younger folks, both men and women, bachelors, they had bunked a lot of Mondays, late coming. They had almost 11 days off. And I said, "Now, this is the data speaking to you. And that's my job now in D&I, that, there is just this perception that maternity returnees mostly, or career people who've taken a career break or done something different, they're not good enough, they're not serious enough, they won't put in what we have to do." And that just gets added on with the law firm or the litigation practice. Look, I talk to a lot of my friends who are in litigation. The cause list comes out a night prior, right? So you have to just dump everything and get onto that file and dust off put off the dust from the file and say, "Oh my God, 3 years ago we filed this, it's come up now." So I think institutionally, we are unwilling to look at how we practice the law. And we are not willing to make it aligned with lived realities of people. And unfortunately, I personally think it impacts both men and women equally, or men and women both. Perhaps the focus or the burden on women is higher because of the larger caregiving. But unless we are willing to really relook at the scourge of the billable hour, as I call it, or the 7 years to partnership, all those kind of cliches that have become, I don't think we're going to solve this problem. And unfortunately, when I was in a law firm and I have worked with some of the most brilliant minds in this country, a lot of them have not come back to the workforce. And that is really a talent loss that we cannot justify ourselves. So that's something I think people should look at in more depth.
Most certainly. Well said, both of you. Thank you. That was actually quite insightful. And in fact, we're trying to work on a survey at the moment to understand, why this is happening, why we're losing women in this exact sort of time frame that we spoke of. So we're hoping we will release the survey sometime in the next couple of weeks. Though to those who are watching and to the both of you, please spread the survey as much as you can, because we're really, really hopeful that we'll be able to pull in more data. So that's really the hope. So yeah, Vikas?
Yeah, so Aparna, just building on that, because you raised some very interesting points about how a lot of the structures are not conducive to both men and women having flexible and kind of careers and ones that they can enjoy. So what from the kind of what you've done and what you've seen having done that legal route, what kind of cultural interventions can we bring into workspaces to make these much more enabling environments for women and men at the same time as well?
Right. So I think because past 3 years I have worked with organizations or companies across sectors, but I will keep my interventions more specific to law because I think our audience will primarily be lawyers. So I think the first thing which I definitely think, apart from it's very easy to use big words like equality and non-discrimination, but I think the first thing we have to really address at the law firms and in law practice is the peer pressure, because I think the peer pressure can be crippling. How soon are you going to make partner? What transactions are you working in? What are your billable hours? I think that peer pressure can be really crippling. That's one. I think we have to start looking at people as human beings and as people who qualitatively bring a skill set to the table and not measure everything on the yardstick of certain kinds of very strict parameters. That's one. I think the second bit, and I'm going to be very frank about this, is I think that I have seen this only in the legal profession, that there is a lot of obnoxious behavior which is not called out just because the person is senior or the person has a lot to teach you. I've had instances where somebody, people fairly senior to me have not spoken to me in a proper manner and have misbehaved with me. I'm not talking about harassment. I'm just talking about obnoxious behavior. And I was advised to take it in my stride because I got to learn a lot from that person. And I said, look, this is not the kind of Guru Dakshina you should expect out of me. It's a senior's job to teach me and to mentor me, and I will make mistakes, and I'm okay to be pulled up on mistakes, but there is a line you cannot cross when you talk to me.
Aparna,
I personally think
you're right, because there's a lot of lack of respectfulness.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think that
what you're pointing to.
Absolutely.
And we've all heard stories, right? Files being thrown, abuses being hurled. And like you said, this is not sexual harassment or anything. It's just pure play
bad behavior. Right. And I don't see the reason why I should, I have been 21, I have been 30, I'm now 40. I stood up to that when I was 20, I stood up to that when I was 30, and I still stand up to it. Whether it's a clients can be unreasonable. There are seniors who can be unreasonable. There are peers who can be unreasonable. Nothing should make you have to trade your dignity to get that assignment or to just fall, be accepted in that place. And I think that, as youngsters, you have to stand up and call that out. So I think because yes, please, Tanisha.
Very difficult to stand up because I've been in that position and I know a lot of my friends have too. And Tejal, maybe you have some insight here as well. It's really difficult to stand up to an obnoxious senior. And I'm talking about someone who was just 3 or 4 years my senior, right? Screaming across the hallway, throwing things, bad behavior through the day because I missed a comma or a full stop. How do you control them? They spiral out of control, and boundary setting in those moments is virtually impossible. And you're trying to hang on to that job because you're calling it experience. It's just that it's not a legal experience, not legal training at all. It's a whole different kind of experience. How do you set the boundaries with such people? If you both can shed some light, it'll be great.
So look, it happens in-house too, right? In corporates also. The problem is, I think we're defining as, if a person is successful, we can accept everything. And it's not just in law. We accept illegalities they do, we accept tax evasions, we accept everything as long as they're successful. Society does not look down upon anything and only values what they call monetary and other success. So I think going back really to Aparna's point of what is success to be defined as is very important for the younger generation, because these are the leaders of tomorrow. They are the successful people of tomorrow, and everybody will do as they see, not do as they are told. if those juniors will be seniors tomorrow, and if they think that that particular kind of behavior is not is condoned and not condemned, then it's a sign of success. If I can throw a file at someone, I have arrived, right? The other piece of it really is a lack of role models, because when I was early in my legal profession, there were a very small handful of women lawyers who were doing well. And they had a stereotype, which was aggressive, loud, backslapping the men, shouting in court. And if you were not that, you wouldn't succeed. I'm really glad that we've got this whole new genre of women coming in who don't have to display those characteristics to actually be successful as lawyers. Because we're not then appreciating them for their acumen, but whether they can be heard over everybody else in a courtroom or in a boardroom. The other piece of it really is also this corporate culture, right? Work gets done after hours at cocktails. Why? Deals get closed at 4 a.m. in the morning with beers. I mean, these things, I'm not saying women don't drink, but the point is that the more professionalism you bring into the culture, and to your point, Tanisha, of respect, I think women will have sort of more of those opportunities without having to change themselves. So women today think they need to change themselves, become like this to succeed. And it's really not dependent on their expertise at all. So, I used to have these conversations about, why can't we have lunch instead of dinner? Why can't we have evenings instead of nights? In terms of gatherings and meetings. And the men would say, fine, you all go home at 8 and then we're all going, to the pool table and we're all doing our thing, which is fine. But then that's where work gets discussed. So it is tough for women. I think a lot of the younger generation has kind of closed that gap. But to Aparna's point, it's not about equality. It's about equity. Are we giving people what they need to succeed individually? Not like equality in all sense of the word. Everyone doesn't like everything. Everyone's not good at everything. Everyone's not the same. So what are the opportunities we are giving each one of them individually based on their individual needs to succeed? But I think it's a societal issue which kind of permeates into the profession.
Workplace, yeah, sure.
I think if I may just add, and I'm going to be again quite frank, I think it's institutions have to wake up that when you hire people, you have to put frameworks to address these issues in place. Everything cannot be a toss up between, hey, this person is a high performer. If I tell them to behave themselves, they may leave. If that's going to be the whetstone on which you are taking your decisions, you will not be able to fix the culture, and you will retain that one person, but you will lose out 500 other people. So I think the culture really, and I thought of going into that is because it is peculiar to what I have seen, when I was working myself, and of course have a very, very strong enabling environment. I grew up in a law firm which really believed in young people. You wanted to do something, they gave you the opportunity to do something. And I really think that was a game changer. I'm a first generation lawyer. I had no background in law. I thought I was good at what I was doing and I wanted to do certain things, and I was given that opportunity. So the more you can create an enabling environment, not be too constrained by the queue that one has to follow, because that's a glass ceiling of sorts for everyone, not just women, but even younger lawyers, right? The more you can have a merit-based enabling environment where opportunities are given to high potential people, and even those who may not have high potential, to really mentor them into roles which suits their what they want to do. I think that will really remove all the peer pressure and the that kind of a skewed burden to perform in a particular manner to be accepted at the workplace.
Thanks, Mittal.
Yeah, I would, one more thing is that you don't just need this mentorship and coaching when you're younger. You need it all through.
Absolutely.
So I was like just a couple of years ago, and I was in a meeting with a large public government-owned company in India. and they're a little more traditional. And through the meeting, that I was sitting here, and there were like men on either side of me, and the guy on the other side kept referring to actually my CEO on the, on my right for every answer. Like I would ask the question, he would answer, to my right. And at one point, my CEO had to look at him and say, but she is the decision maker on this. So it's not that you need it only when you're younger. I mean, people think, okay, first 5 years I've coached you, now go fight for yourself, right? It's difficult the whole way. And it's important sort of to give those interventions that Aparna is talking about, not just early in your career, but throughout your career, because there'll be so many different situations that you don't know how to handle.
True. That's insightful. Thank you both. That was actually a lot packed into this 40-minute conversation. Thanks a lot. And I think, Aparna, to sum up your takeaway, culture and performance can never be mutually exclusive, right? For organizations going forward, I think it's extremely important that we remember that. So thank you. That brings us to the end of this segment, ladies. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did, including your own personal stories.